What's the difference between epics, user stories, and tasks? Okay. First point of order, one of the things that I hear so often, you have to use user stories in Scrum. No, you don't. Okay. Scrum Guide doesn't talk to them at all. It has the concept of a product backlog item, a thing that is going to add value to your product, that's going to ultimately add value to your customer, to your organisation, whatever it's focused on. Okay. You can use user stories, they're a good pattern, but they are not required. So often people get fixated on these things and they're like, but it's best practice. No, it's a good practice, and it is a very good practice, but it's not the only practice. If you just want to log your bugs on your product backlog, go for it. Okay? But you're going to use user stories because everybody ignores me when I go off on this one. Okay? And when you use user stories, the word term epic is going to appear. And I'm going to ignore what Safe did to epics because I'm not going on that rant. Okay? So we're going to take the original thing in the Agile world. These were big stories. Okay? And that's all we meant. If you go to the dictionary, you look up epic, it's going to talk about big. I always think of the film Ben-Hur. Okay? When Easter comes round, I know it's Easter because Ben-Hur's on the telly and I can sleep for 5 hours and I'm still in the same film. It's a really big film. It's a really long film. Okay? It's an epic. And that's all we meant. It's a big story. It's likely too big to go in an iteration, into a sprint. You probably want to break it down more into other user stories. But an epic's just a user story. It's just a term we use to say, this is a big one. We probably want to break it down. People add all sorts of complexities and complicatedness to that, and it really moves away from what we're trying to do. It's just a thing we want to add to our product. It happens to be a lot of work. So you want to break it down. You probably want to consider how to do it. So then you have the user stories that most people are aware of. You've likely thought, oh, as a I want so that. You can use that format. It's a good format, but you don't have to. Really, it's the stories we tell about the product. Okay? So it can be in any format you choose. What we're trying to do is get the developers talking to the customer. Somebody with a problem, a customer, and people who can solve it, developers. Getting them together and talking about it. Okay? The written bit is not the most important part, the conversation is. So a user story is a way of transferring that information. It's understanding that we work best in direct communication, not putting people in the way. If you're a product owner and thinking, but I write the user stories on behalf of my customer, question that. Why do you do that? Could they write them? Could they talk to the developers? And there are very good reasons for them not to. But because I do it is not one of them. Okay? So user stories are a common pattern for explaining the changes we want. As I mentioned, that as a I want so that. Who wants the change? What's the change that they want and why? Really important. Why do they want that change? And use that as a placeholder, as a token for a conversation so that the developers can explore with the customer and discover what's meant. It's an emergent approach. We're going to uncover through talking about it, asking questions, challenging thinking. And then when we come into planning, we're going to take that user story and we're going to break it down into the tasks to deliver it. Okay, this is where we're thinking about how do we solve this. All the conversation that we've been having as part of refinement is understanding the problem. What is it? Why is it important? In planning, we're thinking about how do we solve it? Explicitly, deliberately. Of course, some of that thinking is going to have happened beforehand. It's really difficult to not. Okay? But in planning, we're looking at that one thing and saying, what's the best way we think of building that? And there'll be options, because there's no best way, there's lots of good ways. And as a team, you're going to discuss it and you're going to decide on a route through it, and you're going to express it often through tasks. Just simple steps to take that when you've done them all, you have implemented the intent behind the user story, behind the product backlog item. There's nothing complicated here. when people start asking me these questions in a Certified Scrum Master class, or more often Certified Scrum Product Owner class, they're amazed that I don't go into depth about this stuff. An epic's a big story. A story is a story. It's something that you intend to change about your product to better serve your customer. And tasks are how you intend to implement that change. That's it. If you've got to this point in the video, I hope you've enjoyed it. If so, a like would be appreciated. If you want to hear more from me, more answers to questions that maybe you've got in the Agile world, please subscribe to the channel. And if you've got a question that you really want answered, drop it in the comments. I promise we'll get around to it. Thank you.